My dear, look at her again, the pastor's wife said in their native language, staring at the woman standing in the welfare line. Every time there's food or free items in this church, she's always the first to arrive. She folded her arms and shook her head. Doesn't she have any shame? Just look at her clothes. She always looks so miserable. If I were her, I would stop coming. The pastor glanced towards the line and immediately knew who his wife was talking about. It was Lucy, a struggling single mother. The pastor's wife continued, every outreach program, she's here. Every food distribution, she's here. Every welfare package, she's here. The pastor chuckled. And look at how she carries herself. She always looks so pitiful. He shook his head. Even the Bible says that when you fast, you should anoint your head and wash your face so people won't know you are fasting. It's the same principle. Don't wear your problems on your face. The two of them laughed softly. What they didn't know was that Lucy understood every single word. She stood quietly in line, clutching the empty bag she had brought from home. Her stomach tightened, not because of hunger, because of humiliation. For a moment, she wondered if she should simply leave. Maybe they were right. Maybe she had come too many times. Maybe everyone in the church secretly thought the same thing. Then another thought crossed her mind. Her children, the two little mouths waiting at home, the empty container of rice in the kitchen, the unpaid school fees, the night she pretended she wasn't hungry so her children could eat. No, she had nothing to be ashamed of. She was not stealing. She was not begging. The food being shared had been donated specifically for people like her. Yet, the very people overseeing the program were mocking her. Lucy lowered her head and tried to ignore them, but the pastor's wife wasn't done. Some people have become permanent beneficiaries, she said. They don't even try to improve their lives. The pastor laughed. True. Next month, she'll be here again. That was it. Something snapped inside Lucy. She stepped out of the line. Several people turned to look at her. The pastor and his wife barely noticed as she walked towards them. Then Lucy stepped forward and spoke in their native language. You think I should be ashamed? The pastor's face immediately went pale. His wife froze. Yes, I understood every word you said about me. For a moment, neither of them could speak. They simply stared at her. They had never imagined that she understood their language. By now, several church members had noticed the tension. Then Lucy turned towards the crowd and switched to English. Since they have been discussing me behind my back, perhaps everyone here deserves to hear this. Lucy took another step forward. Do you know what it feels like to choose between feeding your children and feeding yourself? No answer. Do you know what it feels like to stay awake all night, wondering if your children will have food the next day? You mock me for standing in this line. Lucy continued, her voice rising. But I stand here because I refuse to let my children go hungry. The pastor's wife tried to recover. Lucy, that's not what we meant. Lucy cut her off. No, that is exactly what you meant. Her voice echoed through the church compound. You called me pitiful. You called me shameless. You laughed at me because I came to receive food that was donated for struggling families. The pastor shifted uncomfortably. Lucy, please, calm down. But Lucy was no longer afraid. Then she said something that made the pastor's heart skip. You want to talk about shame? She pointed directly at him. What about the food you take home? The pastor's face drained of color. The crowd fell silent. Lucy wasn't finished. I have seen you loading bags of rice into your car. I have seen you taking cartons of noodles meant for widows and struggling families. You divide the donations. You give people a little and keep the rest for yourselves. A loud gasp came from the crowd. The pastor's wife looked at her husband. The pastor looked around nervously. For the first time that morning, he looked afraid. The church compound erupted into chaos. People who had come to collect welfare packages forgot about the food entirely. Everywhere, small groups formed. Some members were shocked, others were angry. And then something unexpected happened. One elderly widow stepped forward. "I thought I was the only one who noticed," she said. Immediately, the woman pointed at the pastor. "3 months ago, I saw bags of rice being loaded into his car after a welfare program." The crowd murmured. Before anyone could respond, another member raised his hand. "I saw it too." Then another voice joined in. "And me." Suddenly, people who had remained silent for months began speaking. One after another, church members shared stories of things they had noticed but never questioned. The whispers quickly became accusations. The accusations became a scandal. Within hours, news of the confrontation had spread throughout the church. By evening, the matter had reached the church elders and board members. An emergency meeting was called. The leaders listened carefully as witnesses shared their accounts. Some spoke about seeing food items loaded into the pastor's vehicle. Others spoke about shortages during distributions. Every testimony seemed to point to the same troubling conclusion. Something was very wrong. The church board could no longer ignore the allegations. An investigation was launched immediately. The following morning, representatives of the church arrived at the pastor's residence. The pastor appeared nervous, but tried to act calm. The search began. At first, nothing unusual was found. The kitchen looked normal. The living room looked normal. The bedrooms looked normal. Then one of the investigators noticed a locked door at the end of the hallway. "What room is this?" he asked. The pastor hesitated. "Oh, that's just a storage room." "Open it." The pastor swallowed hard. "I don't have the key." The investigators exchanged glances. One of them stepped forward. "Then we will have to force it open." The color drained from the pastor's face. A few moments later, the lock gave way. The door swung open. The investigators froze. So did everyone else. The room was packed from floor to ceiling. Bags of rice, cartons of noodles, cooking oil, beans, rice, curry, food items everywhere. The same supplies that church members had donated for widows, single mothers, and struggling families. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The evidence was overwhelming. But the discoveries didn't end there. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered receipts, records, and witness accounts showing that some of the donated items had been sold for profit. The pastor and his wife had not only been keeping supplies meant for the needy, they had been making money from them. The church community was outraged. Many of the donors who had sacrificed to provide those items felt betrayed. Families who had gone hungry realized that help intended for them had been stolen. A few days later, the pastor was summoned before the church board. The meeting room was tense. Church leaders sat in silence as the evidence was presented. Photographs, witness statements, inventory records, everything pointed directly at him. Finally, the chairman looked at the pastor. "Can you explain why these items were found in your house?" The pastor lowered his head. For several moments, he said nothing. Then, he cleared his throat. "My fathers in the Lord, this is the work of the devil." The room fell silent. "The enemy has been fighting my ministry. I have been under spiritual attack." Several board members exchanged disappointed looks. The chairman leaned back in his chair. "So, are you saying that the devil loaded those bags into your storage room?" No answer. "The devil sold food meant for widows?" Still no answer. "The devil took donations from the poor and stored them in your house?" The pastor remained silent. His excuses convinced no one. The evidence was simply too overwhelming. After deliberating, the church board reached its decision. The pastor was immediately suspended from all ministerial duties, pending further disciplinary action. The announcement sent shockwaves through the church. For many members, it felt like justice had finally been served. But the story was far from over, because the pastor's suspension was only the beginning of a much bigger revelation that would shake the entire church. The news spread beyond the church. Some of the church's biggest donors were shocked. These were people who had sacrificed large amounts of money every month because they genuinely wanted to help people. One businessman in particular was furious. For years, he had personally sponsored a large portion of the welfare program. He demanded an independent review of how donations had been handled. At first, the church board thought the room full of food was the entire problem. They were wrong. As they examined records from previous months, they began finding inconsistencies. According to official reports, certain families had received assistance. When investigators contacted those families, many said they had received nothing. Some records showed dozens of bags of rice distributed, but there was no evidence those quantities had ever reached the beneficiaries. The deeper they looked, the worse it became. The room full of food had only exposed the surface. Meanwhile, the pastor's home had become a battlefield. The husband and wife could barely speak to each other without arguing. One evening, the pastor finally exploded. "This is all your fault." "My fault?" his wife shouted. "Yes, you started that conversation. If you had kept your big mouth shut, none of this would have happened." His wife laughed bitterly. "Oh, so you are playing the blame game now, right? Even if I started it, why did you join in? Why didn't you tell me to stop? You call yourself a pastor. If you truly had the Spirit of God, why didn't you correct me immediately?" The pastor had no answer. She continued, "You didn't correct me because you agreed with me. You mocked that woman too. You laughed at her. You added your own comments." For the first time, neither of them could deny the truth. They were both responsible, not just for mocking Lucy, but for everything that had followed. The scandal damaged more than their reputation. It damaged trust. When the next welfare donation drive came around, participation dropped sharply. Many donors were reluctant to contribute. Some openly questioned whether their donations would ever reach the intended recipient. The following month was even worse. Several major contributors withdrew completely. Within a few months, the welfare program that had once helped countless struggling families was barely functioning. The people who suffered most were the very people the program had been created to help: widows, single mothers, the elderly, the unemployed. One act of greed had poisoned something good. As for Lucy, she never returned. The experience had broken something inside her, not her faith in God, but her trust in that church. She quietly began attending another church, one where people were treated with dignity regardless of what they wore or what they lacked. And though she never expected it, she found something there she had not found in a long time: peace. The greatest tragedy wasn't that the pastor was caught. The greatest tragedy was that he had forgotten why he became a pastor in the first place. The food was meant for the hungry. The church was meant for the broken. And the woman they mocked turned out to have more integrity than the leaders who judged her. In the weeks that followed, a special meeting was called. Church leaders, elders, and representatives gathered to review the findings and decide what should happen next. After hours of discussion, a unanimous decision was reached. The pastor would no longer serve as the leader of the church. His removal from office was announced to the congregation, along with a summary of the investigation's findings. It was a painful moment for many members, some who had known him for years. Others had once looked up to him as a spiritual mentor. But they also understood that leadership without accountability would destroy the very foundation of the church. Meanwhile, every food item recovered from the pastor's house was returned to the church. The bags of rice, cartons of noodles, cooking oil, beans, and other supplies were carefully sorted and redistributed. This time, the process was supervised by multiple church leaders to ensure complete transparency. Widows received their portions. Single mothers received theirs. Families who had been struggling finally received the support that had originally been intended for them. For many of them, it felt as though justice had finally arrived. As for the pastor, the weight of the scandal became too much to bear. Wherever he went, people whispered. The trust he had spent years building had been shattered, not because of a mistake, but because of choices. In the end, he quietly left the church. No farewell ceremony, no final sermon, no grand announcement. He simply disappeared from the congregation he had once led. His wife left with him. The house that had once been filled with hidden provisions now felt empty. And the position they had worked so hard to protect was gone, all because they had forgotten a simple truth. When people are given authority, it is meant to be used to serve others, not themselves. Months later, the welfare program was rebuilt with stricter oversight. Donors gradually regained confidence, contributions started coming in again, and families in need once more received the help that had been intended for them from the beginning. I would like to ask, should the church have shown the pastor mercy and given him another chance? Or was removing him from leadership the right decision? Also, was Lucy right to expose the pastor publicly, or should she have reported him privately to the church elders? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed today's story. There's more to enjoy right here on your screen. Click to watch the next story now. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.